Today's guest is Jodie Filogomo, a retired cosmetic dentist who now runs the fashion blog, Jodie's Touch of Style. Jodie made the move to Sun City, Arizona in 2019 after living in Littleton, Colorado, or the Denver area. So, Jodie, of all the places you could retire, why did you choose Sun City, Arizona, the 55-plus community located about 15 miles northwest of Phoenix?
Truthfully, Rob and I never thought we would leave Denver, Colorado. We loved it. But we used to come out here and visit some friends. They actually lived close to Sun City. And Rob noticed he could breathe a lot better because we're a much lower altitude here. Denver's a mile high, so 5280 altitude. So with the change of altitude, it made all the difference with his breathing. So after 3 times coming out to visit, we decided to make the move. Breathing's one of those important elements in life.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty essential up there with water.
Yeah. So we had no idea what Sun City was about. When we were looking at houses, we looked at places close to where my mom was going to be in an independent living area because I'm an only child. So she was going to move out here with us, but not live with us. So we were searching in a 10-mile radius of where she was going to be and happened to like a certain house the best. And we bought the house and realized it was in Sun City and learned so much about the community. We had no idea when we moved out here what it was about, but we would never move anywhere else now. We absolutely love it.
It was kind of a decision based upon where family was located for you, is what it sounds like.
It was. We were looking in this West Valley area, and we had friends close by, and we liked the houses that we were looking at. But once you really start learning about Sun City, it's incredible. It's not just a retirement community. It's really we always call it a cruise ship on land because there's so much to do. It's a wonderful group of people. We've met just friendly, wonderful, nice people. And it has an interesting vibe. If you've ever been to Palm Springs, California, it has that same 50s vibe, mid-century modern vibe, and it's quaint. It's very fun. And yet the houses have that outside look of the mid-century, but the insides, most of them have been updated. Some haven't because they've been here for so long. People have updated them and they look great.
Yeah, I was reading some of your blogs, so it sounds like you actually live in Sun City versus, say, Sun City West or Sun City Grand. So Sun City opened in January of 1960, which is the very first 55-plus kind of retirement, active living, whatever you want to call it, in the whole of the United States of America. And one of the blogs, I think you said you're in the phase 1 area, so you're about as original as it gets. How does, say, Sun City differ from, say, like Sun City West or Sun City Grand? And then have you ever been to like the villages in Florida, or I think there's like a Sun City in like Hilton Head, South Carolina. There's other Sun Cities around the US. It's not just in Arizona.
Yeah, I've read they're all over. I have a friend who lives in Sun City in Vegas, and I think there's one in Nebraska, and yes, they are all over. There's actually another Sun City in Arizona down southeast in Florence, and all of those are newer. Del Webb is the guy who built this original or had the idea. He's very forward thinking in having a retirement community that had all of these amenities already built when the houses went up for sale. This is the original. And then it just was so popular and built out. And then they started Sun City West. And now there's a Sun City Grand, which has changed their name to Grand. And then there's a Sun City Festival. But what I like most about ours, and we have been to the others, well, my husband will tell you one of the best things is the taxes. The taxes are so low because we've been grandfathered in to not have school taxes. Because we're a retirement community, there obviously are no kids here, And so our taxes are very, very low. And that's huge. That's a great thing for retired people. So Rob would tell you that's his favorite part. But then we here in the original have 7 rec centers and 8 golf courses that we can use. And you pay a yearly fee, but it is a very low fee. For a household, it's less than $600. And you get to use every one of those rec centers as part of your membership. And then, so Sun City West, I think, has 2 rec centers. Sun City Festival maybe has 1. They're not as big. They don't have as many amenities. And because they're newer, they're more expensive. So ours is more reasonably priced, and they really keep it up nice. They're in the works of updating one of the rec centers, but most of them have been updated and look great. And we have never been to any other retirement community. We were not planning on that. That was not the goal. So it's not like we did a bunch of research. Which retirement community should we live in? Nope. We just happened to land here and we love it.
How long were you retired before you moved to Sun City, Arizona?
So I've been retired a good 10 years now, almost 11. And so we've been out here 5. So we were retired when we were living in Denver too.
What's the difference between being retired in Denver versus being retired in a retirement community?
There's a lot more what we call clubs here. So if I wanted to go knit with people, I could go to the knitting club. We actually are part of a fitness club where we do Pilates. So there's all of these groups right here in this little, and it's not little, but in our area that we can go do stuff with and socialize with. So there's a best friends dog club because we now have a dog, and we can take dog classes with a trainer, and they're much less expensive because it's through Sun City. If you like woodworking, there's this woodworking club, and there's a couple of them at the different rec centers because the area is so big. And they have state-of-the-art equipment. It's amazing, or so I've heard. I'm not a woodworker, but I've heard this through other people. There's metal shop. There's a Spanish club. There's a computer club. There's a camera club. There are 300 clubs. So we always say, if you're bored, it's your own fault, because there's just so much you can do here.
My parents have been retired for a while, but it's like they're busier in retirement than they are when they were working. And it seems like every retired person makes the same joke.
It's true. And it's nice when you keep busy. You have a purpose and you have social, because that's what keeps you young.
So I think weather is a big factor. The one thing that people would be maybe concerned about in Arizona, at least year round, would be the hot temperatures in the summer. You seem like you're there year round, so you have a pretty good idea. What's the weather like year round? And then what kind of percentage of your kind of friends and people that live there actually stay there year round? And what percentage are kind of like that snowbird where maybe they go back north for the summertime?
Good question, and definitely good point. There are a little bunch of what we call snowbirds. And here in Sun City, I'm going to ask my husband, what do you think? It's about half?
Maybe about
40%? 40% maybe are snowbirds, and usually they go back home about now, April, May, sometime around then. And then just depending on their world, they come back sometimes before Christmas or sometimes after Christmas. We do live here year round. And it was a concern at first. When we're first moving out here, we're like, are we going to be able to handle the heat in the summer? But first of all, I'm sure a lot of it is your attitude. But with technology and air conditioning nowadays, it is no different than living in Chicago all year round, and you have the winter and the snow and the cold. And when it's in Chicago, when it's cold and snowy, you stay inside. And that's the same here. When it gets up to 115 degrees in the summer, you mostly stay inside. But I will also say it is a dry heat. And people laugh about it. People joke about that. It's a dry heat. But it really does make a difference. You don't realize the difference of the heat in the dry and the heat in humidity until you experience it. It's hard to explain the difference between the fact, I always say living here is more like a sauna, whereas in your humid places like Chicago would be like a steam bath. So it can be tough some days, but I don't think it's that hard at all.
I was in Phoenix at the time. I was with my girlfriend, and we did like this road trip through the Grand Canyon and just kind of cruising around, going to whatever different old Western towns and stuff. And I'm from Wisconsin originally. My girlfriend at the time was from Minnesota, and it was like, I think it was like 95 or 96 degrees, and we're at this brewery, and we're sitting outside in the shade drinking a beer. And my girlfriend was in shorts and a t-shirt, and she's like, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I think I'm going to go to the car and get a sweatshirt. Like I'm cold. And like, it's the dry heat. But if you were sitting, like, if it was 80 degrees in Minnesota and with the humidity, even in the shade, you'd still be sticky and hot. I lived in, Colorado for years, and people are always like, oh, Colorado must be so cold. It's just like the sun comes out. It could snow 2 feet of snow. The sun comes out and all the snow is melted at noon. If you don't live in the dry, you don't really realize how much of an impact it actually does have on how the temperature feels versus what the temperature says.
Yeah, and being in the shade makes all the difference. A nice little breeze comes by. We were out walking the dog yesterday. It was 90 degrees out, and it was just delightful. So it's a totally different feeling, and it is hard to explain until you experience it. Now, so it starts usually in June, July, August, and September can be hard only because you're tired of it. And that's a good time when we go on vacation for a week or two, try to get away. But Arizona is not all flat and desert. I mean, you've been to the Grand Canyon, you've seen what that's like. You go up north to Flagstaff, there's a couple little towns like Pine and Strawberry, and they reminded us of Colorado. You're up in the mountains, it's a higher elevation, it's much cooler. So, Arizona has much more diversity than you think. Arizona's very much like Denver.
Yeah, there's a ski resort in Flagstaff.
Right. My niece, she snowboards up there all the time. It's great. Yeah, we went to Prescott in the winter, and it's a little higher elevation, I'd say about 3,000 or 4,000. And it was cold. Now, I will say here in the winter, so more like December, January, even some of February, it's cold. And my friends make fun of me. It's not that cold, but to me, it's cold because this is how I look at it. What do you keep your inside temperature at? We usually keep it in the winter at 68. 70. So when it gets below what you're used to, that's kind of cold. We would go out walking the dog in the morning in January, and it is truly 39, 40 degrees. That's cool. We have a hat on. We have a puffer jacket on. I have my fleece tights on. So it does get cold here. It's usually a 30-degree difference from morning to the late afternoon. So even when it's hot, if it's 90 degrees in the afternoon, when we go out in the morning at 6-ish, it's about 60, which is very pleasant. So there's a lot of variety, over 300 days of sunshine and very dry.
Right. How would the temperature compare to Denver? Is it like 10 to 15 degrees warmer year round, 20 degrees warmer year round?
Denver is very interesting. Denver has, like you said, it'll snow one day and then the next day the sun comes out and it's all melted. But Denver has a lot more, obviously, snow, so a lot more colder days. Usually your heat wave in Denver is more like 90s. I doubt it even ever got to 100. So the difference in Denver, as a fashion person, is sandal season was maybe a month or two long. And by sandal season, I mean that you could actually put on sandals in the morning and then wear them all day. Whereas here in Arizona, I get 6 months of sandal season. In fact, I try to wear my boots as long as possible because it's starting to get warm. Like already today, it's pretty warm out. It'll get up into the 90s today. But this morning we sat on the patio and had breakfast. It was absolutely ideal.
So I think when anyone is talking about these retirement communities, they're probably always looking at like the cost of living. And I was just pulling up some numbers. It looked like the median house in Sun City was $286,000, and just for comparison, in the villages in Florida, it's $368,000. So it's about $80,000 cheaper. But what's your kind of experience with the cost of living there?
Well, I'm sure the houses, it's very dependent because there are condos here, more of a apartment when you buy it, but you're in almost like apartment building or the place. So we have now lived in two places here in Sun City. And the first place we lived was called a Gemini. When I was growing up, we called it a duplex, where you have a roommate. And then you're in a small HOA community. And that community will take care of the outside area. If there's grass, all the landscaping, they'll do the roofs. It's like a townhouse, basically. So there are those, and a lot of those are smaller, and they're ideal if you're a snowbird, because then you don't have to take care of everything. But then there are also houses, single-family houses here, and those prices are a bit more. So now we live in a single-family house, so we could have a fence for our dog, because, it's all about the dog. And they are a little more expensive, sure. But like I said, the taxes are very low. The electricity and all that's pretty much the same, I would say. But there are fees to live here. There's a fee for the rec centers that you pay once a year. Very reasonable for what you get if you take care of it or if you take advantage of it. There is a one-time fee to move into Sun City, and they use it to beautify it and keep it looking nice. And they do a nice job. Over 40,000 people live here. So this is a big community, yet it's not its own city, really. We don't have our own police force. We are part of Maricopa County. So as with any community like that, you have people on a board and running it, and there's things happening all the time. There's projects going on, changes going on.
Denver's quite expensive. I mean, I have a buddy who's a realtor. He's been a realtor since 1983, and I think that he said in the last few years he's had one listing for under $700,000. It was like $699. It was a house that you had to demo it and start over. So going from Denver to Sun City, it has to be at least the housing prices has to be a pretty pleasant surprise, I would imagine.
Yeah, let's just say we did that right. But you're right. Denver has changed. Denver has gotten very busy. The whole vibe of Denver has changed since, I lived out there since 88, 84. So it's really changed a lot over these years. And it just depends what you want in a city. So it's gotten a lot more crowded, and it doesn't seem quite as safe. We used to go downtown a lot in Denver. They had a great light rail system from where we lived, and we loved it and we used it. We'd go down to see plays and musicals and such. And the last couple of years that we were living there, it wasn't quite as safe. There was a lot more homeless, and it didn't feel as good to us as what we were used to. And I know every place changes. People living here in Phoenix say the same thing, and it has. I was surprised that Phoenix is actually bigger than Denver. It's the 5th largest city in the United States, and that was shocking to me, which goes to show that living here in the summer is no biggie.
Another concern maybe people would have anytime retirees are talking about moving is always healthcare. You're only 15 minutes from the outskirts of Phoenix. But what are the amenities like in terms of hospitals or a clinic, things like that?
Okay, so that's one thing. When Del Webb set up this community, he was really thinking about that. He partnered with this guy, Boswell, and Boswell is the big hospital right here in the middle of Sun City. And, it's supply and demand. There are more than enough doctors of every type here in our community. And it only makes sense, right? You have older people, they need healthcare, they need help. They don't go to Phoenix. No way. They're right here in Sun City. There is anything you need. Yeah, it's supply and demand. The Mayo Clinic, too, is very close. Now it's more in Phoenix.
What would you say is the average age of residents of Sun City?
It's a good question. Now, you have to be 55 to own a house here. Now, like when we first moved here, my husband was 55 or over, and I was not yet. And that's fine, as long as the person owning it's 55. But I would say the average age is more around 70 now, especially thinking around our little area here. There are younger people coming in, and that's great. And then people live here, I mean, until they die. Some people move back home when they start to get sick, and that happens too. But a lot of our at our Gemini place, a lot of our neighbors were in their 80s and 90s. So
really?
It's the water. It's great.
I read a stat that said that in 2024 is the peak year that baby boomers are retiring. It was somewhere between 11,000 and 12,000 boomers a day are retiring in 2024. Have you noticed an influx? Like, has that impacted the region at all? Are people heading out to Sun City as they're hitting retirement?
That's a good question. Not everyone here is retired, though. There are a lot of people still working. And some people work like at our rec centers as part-time for something to do. I don't know if there's more people moving in here. There's always a flux because you also have people passing away or going back to their family. But I would say like house sales a month to two on the market.
And what would you say are like some of the biggest activities? Like, I know my parents are huge into pickleball. They play, I think, 5 to 7 days a week. They play in both Panama and Wisconsin, and I know they're pretty competitive. They do dancing, and they actually teach dance classes. Like we mentioned before, retired people are very busy. But what are some activities personally, and just what do a lot of the other residents partake in?
So golf is huge here. Even in the summer, there are people out golfing in the mornings. And the golf courses here, there are 8 of them, and they're much less expensive. So a lot of people golf around here. Pickleball is huge. There is a national tournament out here. One of the pickleball courts, it's supposed to be one of the best ones. There's bowling and lawn bowling and swimming. So there are pools at all of the rec centers, and then a lot of water aerobic classes, which we've partaked in. It's great. 2 of the pools even have water walking. So if you're not a swimmer, but you can walk in the water and there's a current to give you resistance. So it's meant for people who aren't swimmers. There's inside things too, like there's the gyms and kind of classes, yoga classes and such, but they have mini golf courses at many of the rec centers also. There's a lake, so people actually can have boats. They're usually the smaller pontoon boats, and the rec center has 2 paddle boats that you can go out on the lake and paddle around, and you can fish, and there's a nice little mountain that you can walk around at the lake. There is something to do, and there is a lot of outdoor activity. Arizona is known for hiking. We have the White Tank Mountains very close to us, and you can go hiking out there. There's a lot of other mountains. I don't know if you know this, but one of the things I learned after we moved out here is that Arizona has more mountain ranges than any other state. So we are surrounded by mountains, and a lot of people take advantage of it. It is an outdoor living place. It may not seem like it in the summer as much, but that's when you go to the pool. Everyone has pools. You know, if you're not living in the retirement community, everyone has pools, or you go in the air-conditioned gym or play pickleball in the inside courts. It's great.
Do you like living in a retirement community with people similar age to you? Like, there was no such thing as adolescence, I guess you could say, before really the 1900s. Like, you had a bunch of kids so they could work on the farm or whatever, and then all of a sudden you have industrialization and you have adolescent. But the same thing can be said about elderly before. Like, all of a sudden you had Social Security and retirements. I think in 1900, only 1.4% of the U.S. population was even 65 or older. And now, last time I checked, it was like close to 20% of the U.S. And like I mentioned, 12,000 baby boomers a day basically hitting retirement. My parents are retired, and since they live in an expat community in Panama, everyone else has been the same boat. They're all retired. But it's like I always say, it's kind of like being in high school, but in reverse. When you're in high school, you still have parental supervision. It's not your house, and you probably don't have a whole lot of money. Like whenever I go back to visit my parents, I'm like, these people are like, they're like toddlers. I feel like I got to babysit them, but you can't control them because they got money and they're older than you. It's like, we know best. We're double your age.
No, we always say people don't really grow up, right? People do not really grow up. They're the same. And
yeah, I had a teacher that said, you never mature. You just learn to control yourself. Hopefully.
Impulse control.
Yeah, that's about it. And then I think as you get to a certain point, that impulse control starts dwindling. But maybe that's like 85 or something.
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of them around here too. People are people, like we always say. You had the nice kids in high school and then the mean girls. And you can kind of still have that even in the retirement community. We do like it. I like it. It is nice to be around people who have the same, growing up as you did and understand those things. But I do miss the, what's the word? The differences, we'll go into Phoenix a lot. We go to Scottsdale, we go to Phoenix. It's not a long drive, 30 minutes. It's pretty easy. And I love being around the younger people too. And I have some younger friends from Instagram, of course. You get a whole different way of life. You get a whole different perspective on life. And, kids nowadays have grown up with a phone, with computers, with the internet. They don't know any different. And so it's so interesting to hear their perspective on things. So I miss that a little. But, usually, even like when we lived in Denver, you hang out with your friends and your friends are usually around your age. So it's not like you always were around or with people not your age. So you just have to go look for it maybe a little more when you live in a retirement community.
Yeah, I'd say if you're at work, you're probably working with people at various ages, but you're not like hanging out with those people. You're hanging out with your friends on your days off anyways, so...
Right.
What are some of your favorite day trips from Sun City?
So we usually once a week, we go take our blog photos. And so I go with my mom, who's 86, and my friend, Leslie, who's in her 70s. And sometimes I'll have another friend come with us. Usually we try to go explore Arizona if possible. And we have gone on a bunch of day trips, or we've explored all of the museums. There's historic houses all around here, and most of them will have a tour. We love going into Phoenix for like the botanical gardens or the art museum, the big things. But we have found treasures galore all over. We do go up to Sedona. Sedona is absolutely gorgeous. And I remember when people talked about Sedona with the Red Rocks. I'm from Denver. We had Red Rocks Amphitheater. We lived close to it. We'd go up there a lot. And we thought, oh, Sedona, Red Rocks, we've seen that. Oh, no, Sedona is beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been, but it is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I've got mountain bike there.
Yeah.
I go there for mountain biking. Yeah.
It is just amazing. And they have a lot of wine. They make wine there. So we've gone on some wine tours. So that's one of our favorite places. Going down to Tucson is great. Now that's another very historical things have gone on down there. Some old churches. There's the Pima Air Museum. And what else do we go? Pardon?
The biosphere.
Oh my gosh, we went down to the biosphere. It's close by Tucson. I don't know if you've heard of it, but back in the...
No, I've never even heard of it.
Biosphere 2, they did an experiment and basically closed people into this big old dome clear, and they had to make their own food and survive, and it was wild. But they do a lot of those kind of things around here. Like there's Arcosanti a little north of us, where that was back in the 70s, where they was like a big commune. And so you can go tour that. We've done that. And then you have your cowboy areas like Wickenburg, which is to the west of us, and it's an old cowboy town, and it has a lot of neat and historic places, houses, and we've gone and toured there. We've gone out to, there's a dolly steamer at the lake out east, kind of by Mesa out east. And gosh, there is so much to do here in Arizona. It's incredible. I think some of our favorites, though, are going up to the mountains. So going up to Flagstaff, like I said, reminds us of Colorado. There's some little towns up there, Strawberry Pine. And, it's fun because these are folks that aren't really city folks. Very nice antique stores, local restaurants and shops. We always like to support the locals. So we love doing that.
You moved there because you had family in that area. Let's say hypothetically that if you were someone that was thinking about retiring, but you didn't necessarily have family in any particular location, what would you have considered? Would you have thought about, say, a place at the beach like Florida or Texas or the kind of the panhandle of Alabama or something like that?
So before we moved here, we were actually researching Ecuador. We took some Spanish classes. They have a big expat community, and they have a lot of, they have American money and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where we were researching. It got waylaid. We decided not to go with it. If I were to think about like in the United States now, I'm not a beach girl so much. I like, walking on it, looking at it. I don't like going into it as much. There's ooey things in there. But I don't know if I would leave Arizona. I really like it. It's been a huge surprise of the things that are here, what's involved, the different variety of altitudes and environments. I know when we first moved out here, I was talking with this lady about cactus, and I said how cool they were. And her response was, "You're not from around here, are you?" Because she'd grown up here. She didn't think cactus were cool. But cactus are really amazing. And the plants that survive out here, it takes a lot to be able to live with the heat and the sun and the lack of water. This is a desert, but it is I think it's the wettest desert is what we learned. So it's very different from other areas. And I don't think we'd move.
Except my parents have been retired in Panama, the country, for over 20 years, or retired there for 5 months out of the year. But like Ecuador is always on everyone's list. They thought about Ecuador. They thought about Belize. But my mom told me that most of the expats in Panama, and the same thing with like Costa Rica, which they have a lot of friends that retired there, but they say they usually stay for about 7 years and then they end up retiring back in the U.S., whether that be Arizona, Florida, Texas, whatever. And the reason usually is some type of health incident. And if people have listened to my other podcasts, I've told this story before. But basically, I was actually in Panama at the time when this happened. But my mom, even though they had a gardener, my parents had a tree farm, so they like to do gardening and things like that. And my mom was on top of a ladder, and she's like trimming a branch, and she fell off, but she landed in like a concrete ravine. So she had like a compound fracture. They live in like this old little fishing village on the Pacific. So the clinic was like a half a mile away. So we go to the clinic, and they weren't really able to do anything. They were able to kind of stabilize it a little bit. So then we had to drive the hour and a half to Panama City in traffic, go to a window, speak, our crappy Spanish, pay the $3 to go to another window, to talk to someone else, to go to another window. So she ended up waiting in line for over an hour. It was just a complete shit show. And this wasn't even like a heart attack or something like that, but it's like, imagine if you had a heart attack, you're dead. And so most people have some type of incident. Like one of their friends fell on slipped on an ice cube in their house and had a broken wrist. And it was just like this whole rigmarole just on a broken wrist. And it's just like, okay, like, do you really want to put your life in the hands of, but that's the main reason people start leaving. And you have all these facilities super close to Sun City. As you said, Del Webb thought about this. I think he started breaking ground in the 1950s on this project. So he was certainly ahead of the curve.
Yeah, you kind of take it for granted, our health system. It's not always perfect, but you compare it to other countries and you realize how blessed we really are. We can get basically what we need, at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends who's an older lady. She's 75, and she said that one of her, I think it was her sister, I can't remember if it was her sister or one of her friends, but had a beach house in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and she recently sold and moved to Wilmington because she was afraid she was too far from emergency services, even being in the U.S., but being on the Outer Banks. So she wanted to be closer. Once you get to a certain age, I think that's a real concern.
What we've learned, one of the nice things about Sun City is they really try to help their own community. So there are programs here that, if you need help getting to a medical appointment, there are people to help you do that. And if you're having trouble paying your membership or whatever, there are people to help you do that. If you can't take care of your lawn anymore, your walk, there are people that help you do that. There's these clubs that's their goal, is to help people in their community. And what more can you ask for, really? We're all in this together, and no one really wants to move if they don't have to. But there are places here in Sun City that are assisted living. If you need extra help, you can still live in Sun City and get that extra help that you need. It's really been quite impressive. When my mom had her hip surgery, there was a place you could go and they would let you use a wheelchair and use a walker and use all these tools that you need at that time, basically for free. They asked for a donation. That's great. But basically you could get it for free. Where else can you go and get that? I mean, maybe a lot of retirement communities do that. I have never been, so I don't know. But that's what's been really impressive here too.
What were some of the biggest, maybe say, misconceptions that you had before you moved there, that you thought certain things and you get there and you're like, oh, like this totally is different than I thought? Did you have any of those moments?
Well, sometimes when I think of a retirement, older people, you think of the grumpy old men, right? And sure, there are probably some of those around here, but I think a lot of it's how you act to people and then how they react to you. I know as I've gotten older, one of my misconceptions about older people is, when you see an older person and they're not working, you kind of forget that they used to be young and they used to be productive or have a job. And that doesn't go away when you retire. They're still a smart person. They still have a lot of experience. They may not be up to date on all the technology and the new things, but they still know a lot of things. We have learned so much from many of our neighbors. One guy, we call him MacGyver because he can make anything from anything and fix whatever. So I think that's a misconception. People think, oh, they're old people. They don't do anything. They don't know anything. They're behind the times. And it's really very untrue. And a lot of the people here are very up to speed on the new things and technology. There's a computer club. And if people need help, these people in the club will go help them. It's kind of like having your own geek squad. So I think that's a big misconception. Old people, they're old people, but we know so much. As a retired dentist, it's the older dentists that have all the experience. When you first get out, you may have the dexterity and the great eyesight and the rules of what to do, but you don't have the experience of, everyone's different. This is how it can go wrong. This is how you fix it. Those come with birthdays.
What about any misconceptions that you had about either Arizona or Sun City, since you've lived there now for going on 7 years now? Is that about right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going on 6 years, I guess, right? 5 years, 5 or 6, yeah. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you had about Arizona, Sun City, et cetera?
I never realized Arizona was such a young state. I'm very bad on history. I had no idea. But, it's the last area to become a state in the continental U.S. And with that comes, there's, a lot of Native Americans around here and a lot of their reservations. And there's a lot of history that's actually pretty recent but it's very interesting. We had no idea about that. We really had no idea how pretty it is. And you think a desert, oh, it's ugly and boring, but we have just been so impressed, even just walking around our neighborhoods. Like right now, the cactus are blooming. Did you know cactus bloom? They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it's like our own botanic gardens just walking around the neighborhood because everyone has different plants and different trees. They're certainly different from where you grew up. The growing season is very different too. Like when you go to farmers markets, back in Denver, you're used to going to farmers markets in the summer and you were used to, this kind of food at this time and this kind of food spring, summer. Yeah, it's totally different here. And so that takes a little getting used to. We usually have farmers markets in the fall, winter, and spring. Rarely in the summer unless they're inside. And what you get at the farmers markets, just different. You don't always get watermelon in the summer. You get it more in the spring. So those kind of things have been very different. We had just no idea about Sun City, so we didn't really have any preconceived ideas about it. But we really like the roads are bigger because it's a retirement community. They have golf carts. So the roads are bigger to accommodate golf carts on the side. And so that's very nice. The signage is very interesting. It's something that we learned around here. They'll say the sign of the street coming up like a foot or two before the street comes up. And to give you that, oh, here it's coming up. The garbage here, I don't know if anyone's ever talked to you about this, but the garbage cans are in the ground outside by our driveway. And we get garbage collection twice a week, in fact. But it's very interesting. At first you're like, what is this? And it's a garbage can in the ground. And then the garbage guys come and they take the container inside out, put it in a big roll-away thing that then they take to their truck. So that's been very different, very interesting. We also live close to Luke Air Force Base. And one of our friends had warned us about that. So every once in a while, you hear the jets go over and they're loud. And we always say it's the sound of freedom. That's one reason I'm not outside doing this right now, because they'll come by and you can't hear anything for a couple of minutes.
Do you think you'll be in Sun City permanently for the next 20, 30 years, 40 years, whatever, God willing, or at least Arizona? Or do you not really plan that far ahead when you're retired?
Well, I married a habitual mover. So I asked him because we just moved into this exact place 2 months ago. And I said, okay, can I have 20 years here? And he said, well, maybe. So, right now I do not see us leaving Sun City. But things change, right? You just never know. I don't think we'd find a better environment. When I lived in Denver, people were surprised I'd live in Denver because I was always cold. I've just always been that way. I'd wear fleece line tights even in June. That's just me. That's one of the reasons I love it here. I can actually go sleeveless, and it's warm and I like that. I'm sure it's like that in Florida, but you have the humidity, and with the humidity comes a lot more bugs. And I don't love bugs. So this place just seems so ideal for us. Considering I married a habitual mover, we could be moving one of these days. I don't see it happening, but you never say never, right?
Yeah, never say never. And one of the advantages being so close to Phoenix is that you're close to a major international airport. It must be fairly easy if you want to take a cruise or go visit other countries. Is that the case?
Yes, and actually, like, we can easily drive to California. We can drive down to Mexico. The airport's relatively easy to get to, much easier than it was in Denver when we lived in Denver. Even just getting down into Phoenix for arts, we like plays and musicals. There's a great convention center down in Phoenix. So there's a lot here that you don't really realize. Sure, you can't get on a train. I'm sure there's a train actually, but there's just so much available to us around here. So we just absolutely love it.
What would you say are the biggest drawbacks? Maybe things you miss about living in Denver, or just kind of some of the things that you're not a fan of. It seems like there's just a lot of positive, especially like I said. I mean, no bugs compared to Florida. The humidity is huge.
Drawbacks. Okay, so that's hard. There is a lot of dust, but with the dust, because I'm a Pollyanna and I always look at the bright side, with the dust, we get beautiful sunsets. Absolutely beautiful. In our area of Sun City, it is not a foodie town, right? So that's why it's nice that we can go to Phoenix, because we love food. My husband is Italian. He loves food. And we cook. And, there's some nice little local places around here, but it's not the same, as in Phoenix. So you certainly don't have the health restaurants that we look for, the healthy ones. But it's not like it's impossible to get to. I would say most of the people are friendly. In fact, when we first moved here, my friend and I were talking, why is everyone so friendly? I mean, you're walking down the street and you wave to people, everyone, when they're driving by or in their golf cart. You don't know them, but everyone waves. Everyone's nice. My friend said, well, maybe it's because in a retirement community, no one's ever grown up there. You can't grow up there, obviously. So you don't have that feeling of, I've always been here, I'm better. Everyone has moved here, at least to the retirement community, from somewhere else. So maybe that's why everyone's friendly. I always laugh that maybe it's because most people are retired and you don't have the stress of working. It could be. But I appreciate that. I think being kind and nice to people should be higher on our values and on our list of things to do. So I appreciate that here in Sun City.
Yeah, I saw that also in one of your blog posts. You were talking to us about how it's a slower pace of life as well. Even though you have all these activities, I think that slower pace of life is also just not being stressed, having to get up to run to your 9 to 5, whatever.
Right. It's funny. There's a street that goes through, and it's a big street because it's the only one that goes from the east side of Phoenix all the way to the west into Surprise. And so it's backed up, lots of lights, but you have to get on it many times. And, it's traffic, 3 lanes, people are a little crazy. And then you turn off onto Del Webb Boulevard and it's like, it's a whole different vibe. Plus all the palm trees. And I'm sure this is the same in Florida, but I don't know what it is about palm trees, but they really make you think you're on vacation. You see those and the big streets and everyone's just driving nicely. In fact, we laugh when there are 5 cars in a row. We're like, what's with the traffic jam?
Right. And then also, Jodie, you have a blog called Jodie's Touch of Style. So basically you retired as a cosmetic dentist, and then did you start up this blog as you always wanted to write about fashion and get involved, or was this just kind of a side project, or how did this whole project start?
Well, let's see. So my mother was a home ec teacher, has always loved clothes, sewing, seamstress. And so I come upon it honestly. I like to say the nut doesn't fall far from the tree. But even when I was working as a dentist, I would take my friends shopping because I love to shop. And some of my friends don't. So I'd take them shopping, and I've always just liked dressing up in clothes. So when I retired, I thought, I'll be a personal shopper. And I took some classes, and I've always liked decorating, not just my body, but houses. So I took some interior decorating classes, and, a bunch of different things. And I thought, okay, I will be a personal stylist, but it takes a while, right? You need to build up a clientele. So my husband says, why don't you start a blog? And I'm like, what's a blog? So we researched it, and I decided to use my mother. This was in Denver. So my mother lived close and my stepmom lived close. And we were all 3 different decades of ages. And I decided, let me start a fashion blog. And it has evolved to more of a lifestyle blog now. I like to talk about things to do in Arizona. I like to talk about skin and lifestyle and staying healthy and attitude. but the clothing part fits right into everything I love so much. So it's been fun. Rob laughs, my husband laughs, that I work harder as an influencer, as a content creator now than I even did as a dentist owning my own practice, because really with social media, you can be on 24/7. And I try not to be, but I love it. It is fun. I was my own boss as a dentist, but now I'm a boss and I don't have employees, so I don't have that weight on my shoulders. And I don't know, it's just fun. The nice thing here in Sun City, the nice thing for me, because myself and then my crew, we love to thrift shop, secondhand shop. And there are a lot of stores here, just local little ones, plus the big Goodwills and Salvation Army. But there's a lot of them out here and it's great. We use that for our blogging. We use it sometimes as a fun experience. Like we went and did a scavenger hunt at the thrift store once, or sometimes we will style each other. We'll go to the thrift store and we each get to style each other and they have to wear what we pick out for them. So it's a fun part of it that we like, because there's not a lot of malls. I mean, there is a mall kind of close, but the big malls are in Scottsdale and Phoenix. So we love going to the thrift stores around here.
Do you notice that a lot of your friends also have projects like you have? Maybe not necessarily a blog, but maybe they volunteer. Like my mom volunteers at St. Vincent when she's back in Wisconsin, and she has friends that do a lot of volunteer work or things like that.
Yes, there is a lot of that here, especially with the clubs. You know, the other thing about Sun City is there are a lot of churches here. Del Webb basically gave the churches the land for free and then would build it at cost for them, because he wanted this to be a community and church was a big thing. So because there are a lot of churches, that's where you get a lot of the help too for people here in the area. And then a lot of people volunteer at the churches. And there's basically one almost on every couple of corners. So you have a lot of the volunteers. You have a lot of people working part-time too at the rec centers and the golf courses, because there are so many of them. You need a lot of people to help out with those. I think that's what keeps the community young, is that sense of purpose. You know, I've read a lot about it, about getting older, and that sense of purpose and social interaction are two important factors. Instead of just sitting around doing nothing. Retirement isn't about sitting around. Well, it would be if you ask my husband. But instead I make him work. I make him take my photos, videos, that kind of stuff. And it keeps us young. It keeps us going out and exploring. And I think that's what people really like. You know, they like to be busy in a fun way.
So Jodie, thanks so much for spending an hour with us today. I just have two final questions. Where can people access your blog if they're interested in seeing what your fashion lifestyle stuff that you have, stuff in Arizona? And then secondly, just leave us with a final thought.
So you can find my blog at J Touch of Style. And then on Instagram, TikTok, all of those, Facebook, it's J Touch of Style. And my final thoughts are, if you come out here to Sun City, look me up, email me. I'd love to meet you. We have actually had some people reach out to me. We've taken them around, showed them around and what it's like, and then they've moved out here. So I love to show it off and kind of be a hostess of Sun City. So if you're ever interested, ever in the area, please reach out. I'd love to meet you.
My dear friends, that is it for this episode of El Podcast. Once again, if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe on YouTube as well as Rumble. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. We thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for watching and listening, and we will see you on the next episode.